It was another fantastic, what was it? Grand Prix, Japan. Kimi Antonelli becomes the first Italian in 73 years to win back to back, to be an Italian to win two races in a row. I mean, he is now the hero of Italy because if you think about it, Delucia, you've got Marco Bezzecchi, who's won five MotoGP races in a row. He's Italian. Yannick Sinner, who's just create records every single day that he goes. And then all of a sudden, Kimi Antonelli, although he's not driving an Italian machine. So all of a sudden, I think Kimi Antonelli is probably right up there with Charles Leclerc and Yannick Sinner in Italy. What a performance. Perhaps a little bit lucky with the safety car, but he had the speed the whole weekend. So, in a way, I was a little bit disappointed because I would have loved to have seen a George Kimi battle towards the end. But take nothing away from this kid. As soon as he got out in the front, he just obliterated the field. And another victory for Mercedes Benz. Can anybody beat them?
Do you know, let's just start off with Kimi. I think that his recovery was phenomenal. I mean, from going from pole to sixth, I mean, the McLarens, can we talk about how good Oscar Piastri's
Yes,
start was? That was
super.
absolutely phenomenal. We know Charles Leclerc and the Ferraris are always going to start well. It's not really something that Mercedes has been able to get just yet. But I think seeing Oscar Piastri out front was such a relief. And I can imagine for him finally being able to do a Grand Prix, that must have been an amazing feeling. And to know that he ended up second. But with Kimi, I think, yes, the safety car did come into play. But the way that he was able to manage thereafter and just take complete control of the Grand Prix, I thought was incredible. And you really got to see his maturity in this race. I think you really got to see that this is a kid who really does have a very good head on his shoulders. He said he was counting down the laps, just praying and hoping it was going to be over because a lot of the race was a mental game more than a physical game for a lot of the drivers. And I think that, take nothing away from Kimi. Yes, the safety car did help him out, but he had a phenomenal race. And I think that this is only just the beginning of what we're hopefully going to see. Quite a tough battle between who's going to come out on top between George and, of course, Kimi.
After his first win 2 weeks ago, I said, you know what? It reminded me of Mika Hakkinen. Hakkinen, as soon as he won his first race, all of a sudden became a completely different animal. And what really impressed me was Antonelli with probably 15 or so laps to go. His consistency in his times. Every single lap was within a couple of hundredths, a tenth of a second. He was just so focused. So an unbelievable drive from this young kid, becomes the youngest ever driver to lead a world championship. I don't know if these statistics mean anything, to be honest, but they're nice to share. Youngest ever driver to lead a world championship by like 3 years. Let's talk Piastri. Fantastic to see McLaren bounce back. He had the measure of Norris throughout the whole weekend. There was no doubt about that. And then, of course, the two Ferraris. Leclerc, we know is Charles Leclerc. Hamilton was up with him. The two of them were going, and then all of a sudden, this is where it gets so confusing. Things start going wrong. I have no power. I can't do this. The deployment is not working the way that it is. And this is where it becomes incredibly, I think, confusing for the fans of the sport. And of course for the drivers, because the driver, the one lap, is all of a sudden got this full power, feels fantastic. Next lap, all of a sudden has got half the pace. So it's something so incredibly technical that I'm hoping that all of these engineers figure it out sooner than later so that we actually have some fairer racing.
And I think also racing that is determined through driver skill and less on how much battery one has in the car. Because, Max Verstappen was quite cheeky in, having a sarcastic wave to Pierre Gasly when he had overtaken him. But I can also understand the frustration because you almost become content with the way things are when you're a driver in these circumstances. You know for a fact, even if you overtake, it's bound to happen that the car behind you is just going to take the position back. You're almost accepting of it. And I think Lando Norris also expressed that when he did his press conference after the race. a lot of what's happening right now is really out of the hands of the drivers, and that's what makes it so frustrating, because it really does come down to technology. And technology, as we all know, and in our own lives, it has failed us on countless times, and you're relying on so much of a car than it is on actually your actual skill. So I was quite frustrated to see that, because while it is entertaining, there's also a line that is kind of teetering on the edge of, well, it's not that exciting anymore, because if your battery's broken or doesn't work or doesn't deploy at the right time, you have to harvest, it becomes dangerous. And that's exactly what we saw with the Ollie Behrman crash as well.
I just want to go back to the qualifying, and the FIA had adjusted that you had 1 kilojoule, this, that, and whatever of extra power, to try and make it a little bit more exciting in the qualifying, but they haven't got this right. And that is, to us, qualifying is just what it's about, man. Yes, the race, anything can happen, but qualifying, you want these guys flat out going for it to the limit, using as much curb as possible, and you want the fastest driver. And in modern Formula One right now, LeClerc and Verstappen probably the quickest out there. And yes, they qualified okay, but they should have probably both been at the top had they had the ability to just get these cars going. So there's 5 weeks before Miami, and FIA, Formula One management, Formula One Liberty Media have got to find some kind of a solution. This is not real racing. This is not real qualifying. And yes, those who sit there and think, oh, what a great race, and look at all of the overtaking or whatever, do not understand what racing is actually about.
I think that does come down to the technicalities and the complexity of all of these computers, because that's essentially what they are doing. Like I said earlier, it does not come down to skill at all, because we have Charles Leclerc, who's probably one of the best qualifiers in Formula One history, and you have Max Verstappen, who has done it at Suzaka for 4 years in a row and has converted that into a win. When you look at those stats alone and you see that Max only qualified and was happy with 8th position, it's very disappointing and almost discouraging, because at some point you're settling for more a situation than you are for the actual speed and the technicalities that need to be done on a track like Suzuka. So I think, the FIA straight afterwards did put out a statement, and they have said, they are having multiple meetings throughout April to try and sort out the different regulations, what can work, what can't, with the teams, with the drivers, with the team principals, everybody involved. And I'm really hoping that with this break, you can come up with a clear solution, because if you're going slower on a straight in qualifying, surely the math isn't mathing. It doesn't make sense, because we're supposed to go as fast as possible, and we're not doing that at the moment. We're really just trying to harvest as much battery as power so that we can deploy it at the right moment. It just doesn't make sense to what we're trying to achieve. And I know a lot of Formula One fans are not happy about it at all. It does take away from the authenticity of what Formula One is supposed to be, especially when we're labeling it as the pinnacle of motorsport. Right now, that is not at all what it is.
Exactly. And I suppose in a ironic kind of way, you had Jack Black in his Super Mario suit. So it was just
Yeah.
like, really, guys? How much of a joke are we getting it? Let's go through just the others. Lando Norris and OK Rach, George Russell, a little bit unlucky, one has to say, with the safety car, but the incredible ability of Charles Leclerc in a car that we know is not nearly as fast as the Mercedes, to actually hold him off and let him get past and come back again. I think that to me was probably the closest we got to what we would call some kind of racing. So I think the Leclerc-Russell battle was fantastic. Gasly holding off Verstappen also just shows the quality of Pierre Gasly. But then it also just shows, Max could have passed him, but then he knew that Gasly was going to pass him back immediately. So it's sort of like, well, I cannot defend the position, and that's what's so frustrating. Lawson getting in the points, fantastic, and Ocon for Haas as well. So great to see, those teams that you don't really always associate to getting into points. Magic to see them. Hadjar, we've got to talk about, out qualified Max Delucia, but Yeah, just that just shows probably the experience between someone like Max Verstappen and Isaac Hadjar when you have got such a difficult vehicle.
And I think it also shows you the fact that anything can happen on this racetrack with these new regulations because they had a battle in the beginning and you saw them going back and forth. I had already anticipated that they would have let Max through. Max was faster in terms of race pace. It just made sense. But also, he also got very unlucky, Hajar, with the safety car and just tumbled down the order
Yeah.
as well, where Max was able to maximize everything that he could with what he was given. I also just want to mention the McLarens. You have to also give credit to their development. Yes, we didn't see them in China, but from what we saw in
Yeah.
Australia to what we're seeing now, we are seeing a little bit of an inclusion in that Ferrari Mercedes maybe battle. But I think it's been quite interesting to see how they've been able to really recover. I mean, Oscar Piastri was phenomenal. We spoke about that earlier. Lando had an okay race, but was still part of the mix. I will say that it's interesting to see how when the Mercedes is in clear air, like we saw when Kimi took off after the safety car, it's
Yeah.
significantly faster than it is in traffic. I mean, George took forever to get out of traffic, and you have to also commend the way that Leclerc did defend against him. He was phenomenal in that regard. But I think the Mercedes really is only as quick as it is because it's in clean air and can get away from the rest of the pack. Antonelli ended 14 seconds ahead of Piastri, but George was quite close to Hamilton and Leclerc and as well as Norris at some point. So I do think it's going to be quite interesting to see with Miami when we go there in just 5 weeks' time how things are going to play out, because I know that Ferrari is going to definitely do some developments on their power unit and McLaren's definitely going to up the stakes. I think that Mercedes might not have the luxury of having such a hold on the top spots, but this will just make it more interesting for us to see how everyone fares in the coming week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the next 5 weeks are going to be incredible at all of the factories. But don't forget, as much as, we're expecting upgrades from Ferrari, from McLaren, from Alpine, from Cadillac, Haas, etc., Mercedes are not just sitting and saying, okay, well, let's have a 5 week break. So they're also going to be working on it. It reminds me back of 2014. Yes, any car that has clean air in front is going to have a significant advantage. But you're 100% right. It's not as though that Mercedes can all of a sudden just pass. But that's also because of these regulations. Now, and it was warned by all of the drivers, and this is where we really have to take cognizance of what the drivers are talking about. First of all, this is the first time that we've seen Charles Leclerc very vocal about these rules and how they work. He's actually been quite positive up until this stage, which is just shows you everyone is very, very frustrated with what's going on in terms of the regulations. But when it comes to racing, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand, is that there is, as much as it is aggressive and it is incredibly challenging and you are there out to win, there is an etiquette in racing, and that is you stay on the racing line. And the other most important thing is you never ever brake test anybody, because all of you are going at very relative speeds. And you know that when that car is going to actually brake and turn, that is just the nature of motor racing. Whether it's go-karts, whether it's you name it, motorcycles, guys are going 360 kilometers an hour on the wheel of another bike. You brake test the guy, both of you are going to be in a tremendous amount of trouble. So that is just the etiquette of motor racing, is holding your line. Thank you very much. If the other car is better than you, they will go get past you, okay? Or the driver is better than you. All of a sudden, we have this Colapinto Behrman incident. And I was just sitting there watching the TV and I went, geez, what happened? What happened? And then, of course, you get the data coming to you that the speed differential between Behrman and Colapinto, and don't forget the lap before, they were racing with each other and they were going through the corners exactly the same. So they're expecting to have very similar kind of circumstance. And this is not just 50 kilometers to zero. So it's not as though you're driving at 50 kilometers, you hit your foot in the brake and you go, more than likely you're going to be okay. You're doing 300 kilometers an hour to 250 kilometers an hour. That difference is enormous. And poor Ollie Bierman had nothing that he could do, managed to avoid hitting the back of Colapinto, and then, of course, spun the car out and had a 50G impact against the barriers. Fortunately, he seems to be okay, but that was a frightening accident. And if they don't try and get these regulations sorted out, that a car will not reduce its speed by such an extreme amount, we are going to have more accidents like this, and they're going to be exceptionally dangerous.
And Carlos Sainz did say it best. He is one of the directors of the Drivers Association. They had been speaking about this for months leading up to the regulations even coming into effect. And when you look at how things played out, the only reason Ollie got away with not so much damage is because there was a runoff area. When you go to more narrow tracks where you are literally against the walls, Baku, for example, let's look at Singapore, Las Vegas, it becomes incredibly dangerous. And then it begs the question of, this is really not safe for our drivers. It becomes dangerous. And the irony is the FIA is all about driver safety. So at what point are we going to draw the line and realize that this has become one of those situations where we had warned you about it. We explained that this is likely going to happen. I mean, Colapinto was harvesting his battery at that point. And I mean, to be a difference of 90 kilometers, or 45 kilometers per difference, and having to use a boost mode, which Ollie did use at the time, there's a lot that goes into it because, like you said, we're supposed to be, battling one another. We're the same, but literally not even half a lap later, we're completely different speeds. There's just a lot that brings to question. And I mean, the FIA at some point does have to make a huge call because this is going to affect the lives of the drivers, and we don't want that, to be the detriment of the sport.
Yeah. So you know what? We can sit there and go and complain about these rules. Nobody is really, really happy about them. Let's hope that the FIA and the teams and everybody find some kinds of solutions. A couple of teams we need to talk about. And yes, Cadillac had, I think Bottas did about 11 pit stops somewhere along the line. I think they were getting some data. But Fernando Alonso finished 18th.
I know. He finished the race.
I know, and Stroll had to retire the car, and Alonso actually finished the race for Aston Martin. Is this progress? And I've got to say yes, if you consider where they were at race number 1, 53 laps around Suzaka, a challenging circuit as well. I'm in a way like, well done, Aston Martin. And I don't know if it's good or bad, though.
It's like going off a checklist. It's like Oscar Piastri finally got a lap at a Grand Prix. Tick that off. Now all of a sudden it's Aston Martin finishing a Grand Prix. Tick that off. That's really what they wanted to achieve in Australia already. Just trying to get the car onto the track. And now they've managed to finish a race. We're 3 races down. We've still got a couple more to go. It is progress nonetheless. Maybe not in the direction that they would want to go as fast as possible because they definitely want to be, with the top guys fighting for the, the midfield teams. But I think we'll take the small wins. We have to at this point because compared to where they were, it's a big step forward in the right direction for them.
A team that is just not winning at the moment in my eyes. Yes, Carlos finished 15th, but Williams, I cannot actually fathom where they are considering the progress they made last year. I just haven't got a clue. I have so much respect for James Vowles, but something is fundamentally wrong within that team, and you're getting the frustration. Science more on the regulation side, but Albon just purely on, listen, this car is rubbish. How?
And the fact that, you mentioned Bottas having to do like 11 pit stops for testing. I mean, at some point they said to Albon, well, let's just run some tests because we missed out at the beginning of the year. Let's do it now. Carlos Sainz running in 15th. It was interesting to say the least. And there was a really funny moment that they did over the weekend where Carlos Sainz said he's aiming for pole position. And Alex Albon's like, pole position? they would be lucky to be in the top 10, much less pole position. So it's interesting to see how things are faring, because it kind of feels like they hit a massive roadblock and they don't know how to recover at this point. But the car is still the heaviest out of all of the other teams. They are really struggling with the composition of the car more than anything else. And at this point, it kind of looks like we have to go really back to the drawing board to try and find different ways, because we don't even have enough pace to keep up with people. It's kind of like they're running their own race on their own. And I think Alex, especially after qualifying, was saying, I've been telling you guys the entire time, there is something wrong with the car. And it's not just a pace issue. The car is wrong. And I think they, in this 5-week break now, really need to go back and look at, comparatively, what are the other teams doing? Because they do have a Mercedes power unit. That's already an advantage in comparison to everybody else. At this point, it's just looking at the other different elements and seeing, what has gone wrong. Because let's keep in mind, Alex didn't even start in China a couple of weeks ago because there was an issue with the car, with the hydraulics. So, I mean, if this is going to be a repeat of what we're seeing to come, I'm quite disappointed in them, because I had a lot of high hopes that they would be the best of the rest.
Yeah, me too. And especially when you look at a team like Alpine with their first season with the Mercedes power unit, whereas Williams have had that Mercedes power unit for quite a while. And you look at people like Gasly, you're going, sure. And this weight issue, you've got the same engine as Mercedes. Or, where did you, where did you all of a sudden eat too many burgers or somewhere along the line? So hopefully in the next 5 weeks they'll get themselves sorted out. Finally, Cadillac, Sergio Perez up in 17th position. Yes, ahead of Alonso. I think progress for them, but still, unfortunately, they just don't have the pace. They've got a Ferrari power unit. Maybe they're not understanding how to utilize it, even though they do have Ferrari engineers around them. But it is a learning curve for them. But I think just the fact that they are getting mileage from these two experienced drivers, that's getting more and more and more data for them. So, going to be one of a stream of home races for them in Miami. So hopefully they come with something a little bit more competitive as well.
Yeah, I think, when we're looking at the back of the field, seeing everyone just doing testing and then having your drivers complete a race, that is a checklist. That is something that they have been wanting to do. So just to get the reliability is one thing. So now that they've got reliability, they can at least say, okay, cool. Now let's work on the issues and work on them one by one and see how it goes. Because I think also when you're a new team, it's a little bit more complex, because you're also trying to navigate, the internalness of the team and running a new team. But I think they're in good hands with Checo and with Bottas. So hopefully they are able to maybe get into points. I mean, the only two teams who haven't scored yet is Aston Martin and Cadillac. Yeah. And we still have a long season to go. But I must also commend Audi as well. I think that they've been quite strong just outside the points again this weekend. Yeah. But I think that they also have been quite impressive, just looking at the last 3 races that we've had. I do think that maybe, we're fingers crossing for another surprise podium, but it will be interesting to see how they fare without Wheatley at their side. And, they've got Matteo Binotto now, but I think that looking at how they're progressing, I think that they should be in for a good run, a decent run in comparison to the others. And then the Racing Bulls as well. I mean, Liam Lawson's been really consistent, which has been really nice to see. Well, I think he's also found his groove. And he is one of those drivers who I think has slipped under the radar a little bit. But he's done so well, and he's just kept his cool. He also was one of the drivers who did get lucky under the safety car. But I mean, it's for him to end 9th and get some good points for the team, you got to take all the wins that you can get. But I really think that they had a strong performance at Racing Bulls this weekend as well.
Yeah, finally, unfortunately, due to races being cancelled because of other elements or factors that are happening in the world, we've got a 5-week break. Delucia, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, but we'll definitely keep intact. And I'm sure there's going to be loads and loads of information coming out with slight regulation changes that will come into effect from this Grand Prix or immediately from Miami. So we'll keep everybody updated. As always, just delightful to chat to you, and cannot wait for the next one.
Let's do it.